welcome folks to the OKD Community Development Meeting for July 11th of the year 2023. And we've got an agenda to basically look at the card stack that we have in the OKD Planning Board. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, since that's our... Did anyone want to add anything to the agenda other than that? Other than sort of reviewing cards and talking about the sort of video series that we talked about. I created a card for it. Okay, well, let's jump right into that. And that's really, actually, let's start out with that. You'll notice that there's now a card, and I'm gonna share my video screen here, share my screen. We talked about doing this last time. Okay, so folks can see this card. This is the OKD video series. I gave it a name just so that we're not, lacking and like, so we know what we're referring to, right? So I just call it the OKD Foundations video series. These are the things I think that we basically wanted to cover. Does anyone have any thoughts on this? Anything that you'd want to add, remove, change around?
What about like application deployments, database deployments, things like that? That people like want to do with OKD, I guess.
Okay, so like the basics of using it.
Yeah, like my experience teaching Kubernetes, the usually the first things are gonna be setting up cert manager, setting up like database if it's internal or external, then the application, like the real, can you like, let's see if my applications runs on these and how, kind of thing.
Okay. If we start covering user topics, do we run the risk of duplicating stuff that's already out there?
I doubt it. We have very little, and I think that's the problem. Like, it's very hard for the customer like to get the OKD or OpenShift and be successful without an SA, without training, without like, it's just to get an application deployed. Like, think like application and database, primary, secondary, like the thing they get on 2 clicks on AWS. That's the thing they want to do here, like run an app in a database, perhaps a cache, things like this.
Bruce, you have
and the most common Kubernetes things like cert manager, perhaps Argo CD. I don't know. And that's the thing, I don't know, like I'm talking from the things I see people trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bruce, go ahead.
I would see that as 2 separate things. Okay, so the application, possibly including a database, would be one, and then cert managers and Argo CD. That's sort of at the meta level of an application. So I think with the application / database part, that's pretty straightforward these days. Like I do it with my students in the very first week's lab. And if you want to go with a canned one, like start a WordPress application, then that's like 2 command lines. And there are, what I found is that the OCP based tutorials on just applications, most of them work on OKD as well, including some relatively fancy things. So I mean, it wouldn't take too much to do something like that. And the question would be though, application using what technology? Okay, so
Well,
it's
one,
different, or is it? And is it already Dockerized?
yeah, I feel like one thing there is another, let's say, perspective is production versus development, because I think it's really easy to get a MySQL container running, but if you want it to be highly available, and it's not perhaps that simple, at least would require a bit more steps. And
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, okay, so persistent storage is sort of on the difficult side of Kubernetes. Okay, because Kubernetes was mainly designed for stateless loads, and it's very good at that with pretty much no effort.
yeah,
You know, the guy that does the Red Hat, or used to do a lot of the Red Hat videos, you know, sort of flogging the new stuff, Edison, I forget his last name, but he wrote a document on databases, and
perhaps
it gets quite hairy.
yeah, and perhaps even bringing this perspective, like, so if you run on RDS or on a cloud database of your choice, here's the things that you should do, and how to reference things and how to do things.
Right. Although, and again, they were getting into architectural issues. So
Yeah.
if you're like our students will often start with Firebase because that's there. They can do a free version. It allows easy RESTful APIs to it. And Google's already put it in a cloud thing, so you don't have to. So then you can concentrate on the other side. So as I say, like applications, which is actually my main work area, is a big subject. And
Totally.
I think that
Yeah.
I think we want to get a bit more specific.
But I actually think this item was a different item. This was based on how do you troubleshoot and a little bit more of the admin and the internals of OKD for the community. So I think that's what this video series was initially discussed.
Got it.
How to give people access to some of the information that's not readily available, or you have to do a lot of hunting for. Things like the core OS, FCosts, and what an ignition file is, how the machine config operator works, how you actually look at.
That's also very important. Sorry to hijack there.
Well, I think you have a good point, right? Because that there is stuff missing, I think, on the application and developer side. You know, but
yeah, no, if I could just put one last point in, then I'll shut up. Yeah,
you don't shut
Jamie.
up.
Yeah. Like back in the OKD 3.0 era, Red Hat put out this sort of free to download document on application development on OKD, and if you know how OKD 4 works, you can sort of make it work. But a couple years ago, Diane was going to go off and see whether or not that could get updated. Like I volunteered to update it over one summer and get it republished for version 4. And I think that something like that is a separate thread. Maybe it deserves a separate card or something like that. My issue is I don't have the content rights, to edit it because it's a Red Hat thing. But that would be something that would be maybe separate card, and you could say, okay, here, download this, and that will set you off on using OKD.
Yeah.
And I do agree that it's not. Once you get the thing up and running, then the next question is, well, what do you do with it?
Right.
And there you get into, well, okay, so first maybe run an application on it and run an application that you've written, and then you can get into pipelines and production and other issues. So there could be sort of a logical process through all those things. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, as you mentioned, Bruce, there's a lot of very good information on developer.redhat.com, and even just starting with the developer perspective on the console, the source to image, you get taken through and handheld quite a lot of that. So I think the developer roadmap is probably more a series of links and a curated set of good or recommended content, because a lot of it is there. There's some very, very good content there. But I agree that we probably need to put something in the documentation, but I wouldn't mix it with this card, because I think this card is about providing content that's not readily available, and it's more focused at the admin, the setup, the config, the underlying core OKD, whereas I think what we've been talking about is more about the application developer role and how do you create workloads for OKD.
Yeah. Luigi, go ahead.
Yeah, I was basically going to say, I think what Julio's saying is valid, and it could be something that we could look at. But I mean, I would look at more advanced topics like how to run, like with security context constraints, how to run a privileged pod, how to lock down your cluster, how to deploy. We spoke about maybe a high availability database using node affinity and pod affinity and anti-infinity and all those affinity and all those sort of advanced topics, but maybe as a side thread for future discussion. But I think this specific should be exactly what we've said here, but not negating what Julio is saying. I think it's a good thing. It's good to maybe show people, you know, oh, look, this is what can be done on OKD. It's very similar to OpenShift, and these are the areas that you might have problems with, and this is how you can overcome them.
Yeah. And another area, I agree with that, and I think another area that could use some illumination in terms of OKD is, and this came from my own experience, existing developers, how do they move towards a Kubernetes GitOps workflow? Like very specifically, like, okay, you're used to developing on a local machine, you know, using Eclipse or whatever. How do you transition to developing on a Kubernetes cluster, in particular OKD, and how does that workflow go? And that's something that there isn't a lot of documentation on. There's stuff from Red Hat on, you know, well, you can use these plugins, you can use the developer integrations in OCP, etc. But I think it'd be good to shine some light on sort of, if you're a developer and you're used to developing in a local environment with local tools, how do you make that transition to getting the code up and running in OKD? So I do see this as a separate card, but I don't want to abandon it. So I'll create that separate card after the meeting is done, and we can start to populate that as well. So yeah. I don't want to lose track of this. Yeah.
Yeah, a good one. And I think it also encroaches the architecture that Bruce so rightly brought up, because I was fortunate enough to do the DO 500 course, DevOps culture and best practices internally in Red Hat, and it's magnificent because it teaches you and shows you about setting up your architecture for CI/CD, how to do builds, how to do local development into you know, using GitOps and Argo and Tecton and all those wonderful things, you know. So yeah, I think there's tons of material that you know we could use and add and make it quite elaborate. Yeah.
All right, and let's start putting some faces to this. So FCosts, we know Timothy volunteered. SCosts, who is going to do FCosts?
Well, I'll volunteer. I'll volunteer Christian, but he's very busy. So I'll put my name there, and I'll work with Christian offline to get more information from him.
Okay, so Christian, I did talk to Christian.
Yeah.
We chatted just a few minutes ago. He is going to do the OKD FCosts build stuff as well, because apparently he's giving a presentation internally on OKD build and installer basics. So he's going to record that and then maybe do something else. So I'll throw you both under the bus for that. Okay, so Luigi and Christian, and we'll say Christian for OKD, and okay, and then OKD on FCosts, we're saying Christian again, or Luigi and Christian, and
Yeah. Put both of us down. Yeah.
Can we grab Shireen and get Shireen involved in this, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, maybe put Shireen and Alex. Yeah. They're on PTO at the moment, so I'll inform them when they get back.
Yeah, and Mike, you said you could. Do you think you could find someone for MCO?
I did ask around,
Okay.
but I didn't come up with anyone who was like, you know, had the free time to kind of do it.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. And then did you volunteer for Must Gather?
Yeah, I would still like to do the Must Gather one,
Okay.
if I can find some free time, whatever you call that.
It exists somewhere. Okay. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do for markup. Okay.
I think just out of like given the discussion we've had here and stuff too, I think it might be worthwhile putting the scoping on the top of this card just to say that, you know, we're trying to make some videos about, you know, that would help, you know, the admin type persona or something like that, you know, or help to understand kind of like OKD as a system or something, just so we don't, you know, get confused about like, well, do we, you know, should we have a whole bunch of workload stuff here as well? Or
How would you phrase that?
you said it earlier and I thought the way you said it was perfect. And like, now I don't remember what you said. You were talking about kind of the personas involved and who these videos were oriented towards. And I don't remember what you said, but I liked the way you said it.
So
I'll go back to this and I'll watch the video and then update the card to have that. Okay, what else do we need to add in here? What else are folks thinking?
do we need to put something in? I know that sort of Luigi did the sort of user provisioned UPI versus IPI. We've got the new agent installer. I think that's pretty new. I don't know if people really understand what that's about. Just to help people understand what are the methods of installing and when they should choose which one.
Okay, so like installation options, would you call that?
Yes, because I think it's something to do with the agent installer, which is why the SNO isn't working on OKD at the minute. I need to try and follow that discussion.
Yeah, we have Andrea Fasano here. He's the expert on the installer. So Andrea, maybe you can help us.
Yes, yeah, for sure. I've been able to deploy FCosts OKD using agent-based installer. I've fixed a missing installer environment variable to override the OS image, and I've also prepared, if you are interested, a sort of mini agent environment to create a playground for setting up an OKD cluster using agent-based installer on a virtual machine, specifically for SNO, just as a way to offer a simple method for people to play with this approach. So the current method works, but of course it it's using a bunch of environmental variables that are not, let's say, suggested for production. I've been talking with Christian about a POC that I've prepared to better integrate OKD deployment with agent-based installer. So maybe I can reach out Christian to understand how to progress on this activity, and I'll be happy to help on this part for sure.
That would be fantastic. That would be super helpful. All right, what else do we need on this?
You can put a ABI for agent-based installer if you.
Okay.
Just to differentiate between a UPI and the IPI. I'm sorry, I know there are too many ways of installing.
Sure. Okay, folks, what else do we got? What else do we, I mean, this is quite a bit right here. Does this cover really getting someone started in really understanding the foundation so that they can, you know, support, provide community support for OKD and start to share that knowledge? This looks pretty good.
Were we going to split? I'm just trying to think of the conversation last week. Were we going to split the FCosts and SCosts into two talks? One about CoreOS, one about Ignition or something like that?
Well,
conversation
yeah,
splitting.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I wasn't really sure until a few minutes ago if Vadim was going to get involved, but Vadim didn't want to commit. So really, it'd be a question of Christian and Timothy to decide, like, do they want to do this? Because maybe, Luigi, is there any difference at all between Ignition for FCosts and SCosts, or is it like one-to-one for all?
Yeah, well, the Ignition files stay the same, but obviously you point to the raw tar GZ for FCosts is different to that of SCosts, obviously.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I mean, like your ignitions for worker, for master, bootstrap, all are the same. I don't see any differences there. Yeah.
Should we do that as a separate one then, completely separate? So Ignition as its own video? I don't know. Elmiko, go ahead. You got your hand up.
Oh, you can go ahead, and I didn't have a comment for this topic. I was just looking at the list and thinking something.
Okay. So Brian, I think we talked about like incorporating it into the other ones, but does it make sense for it to be its own?
I'm just trying to remember the conversation that we had last week, because Timothy was saying it made sense to actually separate them into 2 15-minute videos rather than having one. I think the split was more about what's common between the various CoreOS and having a video about what is CoreOS and the commonality there, and then what's unique to the FCosts versus the SCosts for OKD, and splitting them into two separate sets of videos. So one standard CoreOS, which will probably include what is an Ignition file and how is it used, and then one specifically for FCosts, and then SCosts, which will include then obviously the build and the pipeline.
Yeah.
But I'm not the expert. So I
mean, the way I look at this is I think it would be a separate. So we would have Timothy maybe do both, and so do it like this. So this is what I'm thinking. Like it would be Ignition, Timothy, get my E's here, then FCosts, then SCosts, and so separating it out into 3 15-minute videos might be, or I don't know how long it is, how long the video Christian is doing for build OKD and build modifications, and installer and stuff like that. Like, but generally these could all be like 15 to 20 minutes or something like that. This is my sense of how it would kind of work out. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I think a video on Ignition on its own is probably worthwhile.
Yeah.
It might not even take all 15 minutes, but that's because that'll be applicable to FCosts, SCosts, RHCosts, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it looks like the only thing we need now. Oh, we got 2 more hands raised. Sorry, we got a bunch of people. Let's see who went first here. Let me look at my, or if someone wants to just go.
Well, if we're popping back up the stack here, I can, like, I was thinking, looking at this list, it might be worthwhile to have like kind of a first aid triage type video that just says like, or maybe I'm kind of wondering, would it be worthwhile to have like a first aid kind of triage type video where you say like, okay, if you're experiencing a problem with your OKD, these are the kind of things you should do. Like you can check log files, you could make a must gather, you could open a bug, like not something that gets very specific about how to fix every problem, but just like if you're experiencing a problem, what are some of the pathways you should start to investigate? That might be really useful for people in the community too. Yeah,
that's like a troubleshooting essentials type thing, like a 15
right. Yeah, right. Like something is going wrong. What are some things you could do, right? Like you could, like I said, like you could look at log files. You could attempt to locate what component it is. You could go here to look for other bugs that are open, just so that as we have community members who start to, because we do get a lot of issues where people are like, this doesn't work for me, that doesn't work for me. Maybe if we could do more about like teaching people how to fish type stuff, that'll go a longer way in the community.
Yeah. So I put my name down. Does anyone else want to volunteer to do that with me? We could record a screen share video. Anyone? All right.
I'm certainly happy to help you, Jamie.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll put you down here to at least knock out something quick that can cover this. Yeah, because that's actually, I've noticed in the Slack channel in particular that folks, even though there's a section in the OKD and in the OCP documents about troubleshooting, a lot of folks don't really dig in there and don't really know how to get started or where to get started, right? All right, so let's see. So who's next? Mr. Fasano, are you next? Yeah.
I think Bruce was.
Oh, okay, Bruce, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is really good. At some point, like FCosts is sort of around enough so that people are going to wonder which they should use. So it might be useful to have some guidance on why you would choose one versus the other. Okay, as a and that could be, I mean, like one of the problems with doing the half-hour, 15-minute videos is that you can waste a lot of time in getting started and setting the scene. So I suggest after we do some of these more focused ones, we then look at organizing them and what's missing and getting some flow between them. I'm not suggesting we should worry about that right now because we don't have a whole lot to organize. But after we get some of these, then we can try and do more of that. I'd be happy to get involved with the troubleshooting as well. Now, in terms of the flow things, it seems like we could go through this whole exercise on the GitOps type stuff, that's a whole nother separate set of these things. And if Julio wants applications, you know, that's a third one. But along these lines, which is admin, I guess we could sort it into installation versus second day operations, which seems to be sort of the way we're flowing. You know, like troubleshooting installations is slightly different than troubleshooting upgrades, for instance. Although there is some commonality there. Okay.
I think that's a good path forward, right? To break that down into basically 3 categories. Okay, next hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, 3 points. Starting from the ignition, I think probably also butane could be added in the list. Typically, when you talk about ignition, you throw in the other point for troubleshooting, I definitely agree it's fundamental. For example, for the agent-based installer, there is also an agent gather step that it's fundamental for gathering and understanding what didn't went correctly. And I think could be relevant, especially I noticed when people opens up issues on the OKD project, having an indication on how to troubleshoot this thing initially could be, in my opinion, a fundamental thing, and not only for letting people understand themselves what's the problem, but also eventually to propose the right amount of artifacts to the community. For the installation option, maybe I don't know if it's better to split between the different possibilities, UPI, API, and ABI. So maybe for UPI and IPI, there could be better people, better option. I was focusing lately on agent-based installer, so that could be another point. If there are other volunteers on UPI, API, I will be happy for that, and let me focus on just the ABI part.
Okay. I think for UPI, like UPI installations can vary depending on what you're putting it on. But there are some basic things that are needed for UPI that I noticed some questions in Slack, like, you know, do I need to have a load balancer in front of it and things. And so I think a basic UPI, these are the things you're going to need type session would be helpful for sure. You know, these are the types of things that you're going to need if you're provisioning this. Someone interestingly enough asked in the Slack channel yesterday or the day before about AWS not being like, if there would be an option to do AWS, I guess it would be a UPI that didn't rely on Route 53 for its DNS. And I haven't heard anything coming out along those lines, but they mentioned that they thought they saw some stuff online, but that's stuff like that. If that happens, that's going to get really interesting and really really make it even more complex. UPI even more complex. Cool. All right. So are we good with this set? I don't want to make this too big of a task, because we definitely want to get this done and not make it so big that we don't get this done. But are we pretty good here? We just need to find someone to do MCO. Is that what we're looking at? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Let's see here. So I guess the next thing would be, do we want to time box this, or do we want to just say when people can get it done?
I mean, if it were me, I would probably break down like have this foundational video series be some sort of epic with all these cards as like, you know, tasks underneath it, and then just put them on the backlog, and we can like pull them off the backlog as we get to them. Unless we think we actually have a time frame that these could get done in.
Yeah,
I don't know that we do. Yeah.
Also, we're coming into vacation series in the Northern Hemisphere, so people are probably going to be out. I mean, ideally, we want them ASAP, but I'm very aware people have got day jobs, and I think we have to be respectful for that. But I mean, it'd be good if we could sort of try and say sort of by September, as we come after the vacation period, to try and get these in place by say mid-September, and then gives people sort of like 2 months to try and schedule them in. But
All right. I think that sounds reasonable, you know, by fall-ish. Put this in the card.
But it probably does make sense, as Almiko said, to actually make each one of these a separate card, so we can then track them individually rather than making these all check boxes within one. Unfortunately, I don't think Git projects has the feature of an epic in a subcategory. I think it's a bit simpler than that.
Oh, we'll massage it a little bit, you know, or worst case scenario, we'll get a Jira instance set up. Let's see here. Do we have time? We've got 20 minutes. Can we pivot to operators and talk a little bit more about that? I know, Brian, you wanted to keep the momentum going on operator stuff. Do we want to pivot to that in the last few minutes here?
Yeah, I'm not sure we can actually do much conversation, because obviously I haven't had a chance to catch up with Christian yet, because I think a lot of the action is against me and Christian. I was on holiday, and then I've had family visiting, so I haven't been very active in the last 2-3 weeks. So I'm not sure we can actually do much on operators. Although I do have a question for the Red Hatters. Is there a way to track OCP operators? Because I've noticed that there's very little tagging goes on within the Git repos. So is there a way to find out what is the source of truth for a specific version? Because I'm trying to think, if we could try and keep them in line, the OKD and the OCP, it would be useful. But I'm guessing that a lot of that is buried in PROW, and we may not have access to that publicly. But I don't know. It's a question I was going to ask Christian, but I haven't got around to it yet. But if anybody happened to know,
if you have the, let's say, yeah, you see, I think that's the biggest problem, that you don't have access to the Red Hat index catalog. So let's say 412 or 413, and inside there, you've got all the information about every single operator that gets published with that index. And their versions, and they sit in a specific folder, in a folder called configs, and then they have declarative configs inside them on, you know, what the operator does, its bundles and its channels, available channels, and all that type of thing. I'm just thinking I'm not sure how we could get access to that, because that sits behind subscriptions.
that's what I guessed.
Yeah.
This is sort of hidden in some way, because ideally that's what we want to do. So I'm guessing that's similar to the sort of the core operators, where you can go and look, and it has a link to the Git commit that built the source. So if I take any of the core operators within the cluster, I can actually go and find the Git commit that was used to build that.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got that, but you have to have access you have to have a pull secret and have access to the catalogs to actually be able to get to that information.
But having said that, though, to go and register on console Red Hat whatever.com, I think it's free. You can register, and then once you've downloaded a pull secret, you should be able to get that catalog then.
Are we allowed to use it and put it in the pipeline without getting our hands slapped? Because it does say you got 60 days when you do that. Because ideally, we want to put this into a pipeline, so it'll automatically trigger and automatically generate when it needs to see, when it sees something has changed. But
yeah, I think that might be a problem. You're right. After 60 days, I mean, that's the trial period. Yeah. You see, for us, it's easy because this is what we have internally. But for the community, there's nothing.
And actually, in general, I'm still seeing a lot of confusion amongst users about the whole pull secret thing. I almost feel like we need to elaborate on that a little bit more for clarity, because something came up the other day where someone asked in the Slack about, I don't remember what operator it was, but it was, and then this conversation about the pull secret started, and yeah, it was clear that there needs to be some clarity about, because we had that little bit in the FAQ about, well, you can use the bogus pull secret and whatever, but then that, I think, created some confusion. So maybe that would be a separate topic there, is to create a page that sort of highlights the pull secret phenomenon.
yeah, because the fake pull secret is just to get past the installer validity check.
Yeah.
Whereas the operators, they actually get installed, but they are disabled. But it means that if anyone goes and looks at it, it's like, well, how do I get this catalog to be enabled? And it relies on you having the global pull secret in the OpenShift config namespace, I think it is.
Yeah, it is. And actually, someone said that they were specifically told not to relay to people how to change out and use the pull secret to get the catalog changed. So yeah, let's do a page that outlines the whole pull secret situation, and then for the operators, what would be next steps then in terms of the operators and sort of working around this?
Well, I think we need to have a conversation, Luigi, with the powers that be in Red Hat to work out, even if it's a secret that we give a pipeline that isn't made public, just so we can get that information. But I think we do need somehow to actually tie in the OKD builds, so there is some parity about versions of when an operator gets changed, when we need to republish an operator. Because what I'm trying to do is set up the operator pipeline with minimal resourcing needed to keep it running, because I'm just aware that if we end up with 60 operators in there, we don't have the power or people power to go in and have them doing manual checks all the time to see, does this need rebuilding, does this need updating, is there a newer version of this? So we want to try and automate all of that, and that is happening already within OCP. So we want to sort of jump on the back of that, but it would be nice if the Proud tagged the public Git repos, so we could actually just use that. But I'm aware that it's not happening, and it's all within this contract.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because inside there you've got, if I'm not mistaken, the Red Hat Marketplace operator, you've got something like 100 and, is it, or was it 93? Somewhere in that region. It's upwards of 90 operators inside there.
Well, you've also got the Red Hat certified, you've got the Marketplace
operator. You've got the community one as well. So for those ones that it's okay, but the Red Hat, the more critical one is the Red Hat, where you've got GitOps and you've got Tecton and those things. Yeah. And and to monitor them to see where a change in Git has happened. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit more difficult, but yeah, I agree. Let's see. We fish around and talk and chat. Speak to the guys. What you could do is we have the ZStream releases really happen once a week. So you could just have a cron job running, and at the end of the week, just go have a look, read the catalog, and see if any hashes have been changed. I mean, it's not elegant, but it's doable.
But it still needs the pull secret to get the catalog.
Yeah, that's the issues around access to that catalog. Do we have the rights to get access to that catalog? And I'm going to say at this point in time, maybe for 60 days, but after that, then no.
Okay, so is it worth us setting up a call during sort of daytime? And can you arrange that, Luigi, just to have a chat with maybe someone who does the catalog within OCP?
Yeah.
Just look at what is possible, what would be possible. Obviously, we don't want Red Hat to have to change anything, or they probably won't change anything for us. But we just want to see what is possible. Because again, I don't want to pick up any operator changes that haven't yet been released. So we can't just rely on commits within an operator repo, because it might be a partial fix, or it might be a
and then the other thing is, to that point is the CVE, and that is totally internal to Red Hat. Some of them we're not even allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
They don't even get published in emails, so that's the sensitive part, and it's with regards to the CVEs and erratas and that type of thing. So I agree. It's going to be a bit more of a. But anyway, I'll dig around, ask the guys, and see if we can get something set up.
Brilliant, thank you.
Excellent. All right. Anything else on operators so that we can keep the whole operators thing moving forward? Anything else? No. Okay.
I do have there is a pull request in OKD.io that I do want to talk about. I asked you to sort of look at it last time and nobody really knew anything about it. So.
Oh yeah, let's.
Before we run out of time.
Yeah, that was what was it? Let me find it here.
It was somebody wants to bring in a new tool.
Gitpod. Yeah. All right. Let me hold on 1 second here. Bring it up. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Let me pull this up and share my screen. Yeah, Gitpod.
So as far as I'm aware, it's just a way of running a container on the cloud. It's a service that allows you to run a container on the cloud.
Julio, do you want to talk to this pull request?
Yeah, the thing I did there was two things basically, and both trying to cover the same thing of making it easy for people to see their changes. So Gitpod is like our code ready containers, but better, I'd say. It's just you can click that URL right there, and it will run the thing entirely because it has a init command, and you can see your edits right away. And also there is a Docker file that does the same. So if you prefer running it on your own machine, you can just Docker run it, and you would see the changes as well. I think that might be in a separate PR though. And that's just the way I edit the docs anyway.
Okay.
Do you have to pay for it? You have to pay for Gitpod because
you have 50 hours free, and after that you have to pay.
Because my thought was MKdocs is such a simple tool And there is like an npm run already within the repo, so you don't need to create a Docker Hub because there's a public container for MKdocs already built. So you can just say npm run. If you wanted to run it using Podman or Docker on your local machine, or install it. So that's what the documentation suggests. And it was really just, what is the process of adding new tooling? And did we want to have a discussion around, because I'm just thinking if everyone adds their favorite tool, you get a very messy repo. So is there a process of sort of adopting a new tool within the community, or?
Yeah, I think nowadays it's the standard thing is to have a container, and so the container does everything, so you don't have to know what version of npm or Node.js you need, and just run Docker build, Docker run, and done.
And,
So
that's already in the docs. If you look at the doc source, you'll see in the package.json there is an npm run, and you can run using a public Docker container, a public container that's already built. You don't have to build one yourself for MKdocs. So you can actually run it against Podman or Docker.
And I think that's actually, let's see here. Documentation. Where is you had a page on?
Yes.
Where is it? Do you remember where that page is for?
I'm looking for it now. I thought it was in the documentation. Have we lost that page?
Documentation, product documentation, updates if you encounter. Process range set out in the working group section of the documentation. Oh, here we go. Modifying. Oh, you know what? Because it's under the subgroup. We should pull it out of that. Because it's what it is it's buried under the working group stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so here's the page that outlines the process for making changes.
Yeah, and if you click on that setting of your development environment, and if you just go down to the bottom, so you can just run the npm podman build, that'll build a page, and then npm run podman serve, that'll serve the page. So you can either use your locally installed Docker container or Podman container run.
So I feel like this is sufficient. Just because it sort of integrated into the overall tool that we have. You know, Julio, did you see this yet, or were you not aware of this?
No, this is the first time I'm seeing this document. But anyway, I think I use it the same thing. It's just the build.sh file that's there. So what I just did was add a Docker file with the thing. I don't know if there was already a Docker file there, so that might be deprecated. So
You don't actually need one, because I say there is a public container on Docker Hub for MKdocs.
But then you have to copy the content.
No, you just mount the directory with the volume. You just mount your source into the container, which is what that npm command does. It just mounts the volume into the pre-built container.
Maybe we should do that at our next community session, like spend 15 minutes of just like, this is how we edit a page and stuff like that. I think that'd be good for the community to see. All right, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that there's two things. There is the actual pull request, is it needed? But I think then there is the more general, when people want to introduce a new tool, is there a way that we actually evaluate that? Because up to now, it's been people do. I'm guilty of that myself. I set this up and I did what I thought was right. I didn't ask permission or get a community sense of what would people prefer to happen. And I think if we want to grow the community, I think we should be a little bit more community minded in terms of getting a consensus of what is the best practice, the best tooling that people want to use and the preferred method of working. So I think there are two questions here.
Mm-hmm. So which question should be answered first? I feel like we can maybe keep this pull request open while we have the other discussion. Does that make sense? Like sort of defining process?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. As I said,
Yeah. Totally.
Okay, then let's do this. Julio, check out the page again. It's kind of buried, but check out that series of pages.
It's the same, like the commands in the Gitpod are the same. It's just I thought, like, if I was editing the documentation, what do I miss here? And one is Gitpod, because I use that a lot and it allows everybody to have the same experience and not no commands and just get one click in a link and done. So they wouldn't have to even find this page. So I think it really makes it easy. But it's, again, it's one tool, it's my preference, as you said. Perhaps we should be more careful about this. I don't think so. It's just a harmless YAML file, but
well,
anyway.
it means
Also we'd have to figure out what to do after 50 hours.
But it's a third-party service that we're asking the community to sign up to.
Oh, like if you want, like if you want to just check out the code and use your own machine, that's okay. But the good thing about Gitpod is that it will run on the image with everything pre-installed and ready to run, and even already running and built, because they pre-build the images. So for editing docs, 50 hours is probably more than enough. I think it's a very useful tool. And but again, that's the way I work.
So I want to be mindful of time because we're at time now. Let's have these two. We have these two threads basically coming out of this, and we'll at the next meeting sort of flesh them out a little bit more. Both of them out a little bit more. I did want to direct folks to there's a new FAQ. You might be familiar with the one that's the how do I see what's inside of a CI release and the idea of the components. I added a new one based on something I saw Vadim say, which is how do you find out the version of a particular package within a release? And so this shows you how you can go into the machine OS content and then actually query the package to find out what version of something is, like cryo or something like that. So just a heads up so you can direct folks to that if you ever see that question. All right, I want to call this because we're a little bit over at this point. Excellent conversation, and we'll pick up all of the things that are pending. And for all the to-dos on the video stuff, please go out and start talking to people to get these videos done. All right. See you, folks.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.